Should films dealing with dark or sensitive topics come with trigger warnings? Let's talk about it. What is a trigger warning? A trigger warning is a statement that comes from a work of sorts, and you see this a lot in books, particularly dark romance. That's kind of where this conversation is coming from, but we'll get to that in a minute. But it is a statement warning people that the book, or we'll say book for right now, book features sensitive, dark topics that could set people off. So domestic violence, sexual violence, suicide, anything that's seen as triggering. This is not the same as like a content warning or film rating or even a disclaimer. Like you might see it at the front of some television shows where they're dealing with something like maybe suicide or saying this, movie features or episode features this topic, viewer discretion is advised. That's all you're going to see, right? And then you might get a little title card at the end saying, hey, call this number for resources. A trigger warning is very detailed in that it's going to tell you exactly what's featured in the film, and it's going to give you a warning or a suggestion to brace yourself. That's a trigger warning. This conversation has been going on for quite some time, a little over a year, but it's kind of blown up in the last, I'd say 2 months, particularly with the films It Ends With Us, the movie starring Blake Lively, and then Blink Twice, directed by Zoe Kravitz, stars Channing Tatum. Ends With Us is based on the novel by Colleen Hoover. Now, you can go into Book Talk and see all the different conversations surrounding that book and Colleen Hoover as an author, as a person, but a lot of people felt like that movie should have come with trigger warnings because, number one, they thought the marketing was misleading. We can also talk about that another time. A lot of people thought that, because this movie is talking about domestic violence and it also features some sexual violence, that it should have come with a trigger warning, that they should have prepared their audience for what they would experience. And there is, I wouldn't say a rumor, but it's thought or suggested that Zoe Kravitz was, in a sense, inspired by this discourse that she decided to put a trigger warning before Blink Twice, which features sexual violence. And my question is, should we be doing that with respect to films? Should films that feature sexual violence, suicide, domestic violence, triggering subjects, should they come with trigger warnings? Give you a little quick example. So this book right here, Haunting Adeline, dark romance. When I say dark romance, I mean dark. I don't just mean, it happens at night. Incredibly dark themes, kink, you name it, it's in here. But I actually haven't read it. I bought this a while ago with the intention of reading it. I just haven't gotten around to it. But this book is infamous for its trigger warning. Now, I would read it, but I don't want this video to get taken down. But I will say the last little paragraph here, it says, this book was previously taken down due to the warning, but you can also find them in reviews on my website or feel free to message me directly. Your mental health matters. But every little kinky thing that this book features is mentioned in the trigger warning. So before you even start the book, you already know what's in it. Should we have that before films? There are pros and cons to almost everything. So what are the pros of trigger warnings? Just to make sure we're all on the same page, because now we're talking about film. That's your book trigger warning. So with a film, you have, I mentioned a disclaimer, which if it's, especially like an episode of Law and Order SVU, if they're talking about something that, not family friendly, there's going to be that viewer discretion is advised. But with a film, so you have the film rating, so G, PG, PG-13, R, NC-17. Now, if you did not know this, you can go to filmratings.com and actually look up the rating and see why it's rated what it's rating. So looking at Blink Twice, it's rated R for strong violent content, sexual assault, drug use, and language throughout, and some sexual references. That's the content or film rating for Blink Twice. Now, the trigger warning that accompanied the film, well, I say accompanied, it showed before the film, said, trigger warning, We are proud to finally share Blink Twice with audiences in theaters worldwide this week. Blink Twice is a psychological thriller about the abuse of power. While this is a fictionalized movie, it contains mature themes and depictions of violence, including sexual violence. This may be upsetting or triggering for some viewers. For resources that offer support, visit blinktwiceresources.com. That is the trigger warning. With trauma comes triggers. It's just natural the way that happens. So if you've been through something traumatic, in that healing process, there are going to be certain things that you see, certain things that people say that are going to set you off or put you in kind of a PTSD sort of episode. I went through something very traumatic in 2010. And for the longest time, I had a trigger. It was very specific. And whenever I saw this thing, it was like my heart rate would get up. I'd get scared. There were certain other triggers. Like if I talked about it for the longest time, for years, if I talked about it, I didn't sleep for 3 days. I didn't eat for 3 days. And it was almost like I was reliving that 72-hour period. That was the traumatic event. It was also seeing certain types of people that was very triggering for me. But this is me going out in public and seeing, everyday random things. Now, did I tell people, hey, don't ask me questions about this thing, it triggers me? No, I just kind of dealt with it because I forced myself to deal with these triggers because I don't want to live like that. I don't want to go about my business, go to the mall, see something very normal and then have a mini panic attack. I don't want that. So I worked very hard to get past those triggers to the point where seeing these things didn't bug me, it didn't set me off. So I understand, having gone through something very traumatic, that seeing certain things or certain objects, or even seeing, pieces of what you've been through depicted on screen or, written about in a book can take you back to that place, can be very triggering, can set you off. So I can see the pro in having trigger warnings when you're talking about a subject matter that can be very triggering for a lot of people, especially when your intended audience might be people who've experienced that very thing. Having a trigger warning and letting them know, hey, you might want to brace yourself. We are going to deep dive into those topics. I definitely see the pro in that. The cons for trigger warnings is that trigger warnings by default are spoilers. Not necessarily spoilers of the plot, but spoilers of the experience, because it's telling you beforehand how to engage with the content, that before you even get into watching the film, you need to protect yourself. You need to build a barrier. You need to maybe keep some distance. So you're already being prevented from engaging with the content the way the author, the writer, the filmmaker intended. You're not going to get the full experience because you've been warned to brace yourself. The other con with trigger warnings is that most people don't need trigger warnings. They don't need to be warned beforehand or even given a disclaimer. They really don't care what's in it. They're not one to look up and do their research to see what topics are going to be, mentioned beforehand. They're able to go in, and if they're shocked, they're shocked. If they're dismayed, they're dismayed. And if they're triggered, then they're triggered. But most people don't need trigger warnings. So who exactly are we catering to with trigger warnings? This small minority of people who feel like they need it? Or who are this book talk community that, in a sense, if we're being honest with ourselves, gets off on trigger warnings? I'm sorry, I have a hard time listening to people say, well, we need trigger warnings when you actively engage with books like these. Now, I'm not shaming anyone. I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad for their reading choices. All I'm saying is, good grief, Charlie Brown. Like, let's be real here for a second. For a small group of people, the trigger warning is part of the experience. Being told where the loops on the roller coaster are is what gets them going and helps them to get engaged in the story. You have a lot of people who don't know how to engage with books without a trigger warning. They'd rather be warned beforehand than be surprised. So do you need a trigger warning because it's good for you, or do you need a trigger warning because you don't know how to engage with the content without it? So I understand where people on the pro side for trigger warnings are coming from. You have people who definitely have been through trauma and they have triggers and they have things that set them off, and it would be nice if they were warned beforehand. But I also understand on the other side that you're spoiling the experience by adding a trigger warning, by, in a sense, telling your audience how they're going to engage with the content and how to avoid engaging with the content in that way. You've ruined the conversation within the film. Now, my personal opinion, H.D. Carlton, the author of Haunting Adeline, when she said in her trigger warning, your mental health matters, I think what she should have said was, your mental health is your responsibility. I think by, allowing or even forcing trigger warnings on films, what you're doing is you're forcing everyone, not just the filmmakers, but also the audience, to carry the weight of your trauma. And sometimes trauma, it's your own doing. And sometimes trauma is bad things that happen to you outside of your control. But unfortunately, it's yours. And you have to carry it and handle it and heal from it on your own time, but it is your responsibility to put in that work. The rest of the world shouldn't have to put in the work for you or hold your hand and walk with you in that work. That's just not how the world works. The world doesn't stop spinning because you're broken. The world is not going to wait for you to heal or recover. As unfair as it feels, and sometimes it is, you have to function and adapt in a world that's not thinking about you. Art is subjective, and what you get out of a film is what you get out of it. It may not be what the filmmaker intended, but I at least want the opportunity to engage with the film the way the filmmaker intended. I want at least that option. But when you put a trigger warning and tell me to brace myself, I'm robbed of that opportunity. If you're someone who feels like you need that trigger warning, you need that space and that wall, you need to hurry up and build that wall before you even get to that part of the film, then you need to do better research. You need to do your own research on the films that you plan on seeing. This notion that, oh, we weren't prepared for what was in It Ends With Us. You didn't do your research. Everything you needed to know about that movie, you could have gotten from freaking Wikipedia. Like, it was all there. If you didn't do the work, if you didn't do the research, and then you go and see this movie and you're like, oh my gosh, how did I not know? That's on you. It's not up to the marketing team to tell you what's in the movie. The point of marketing is to get people in the seats. And they did. The movie was an incredible success. But I think Zoe Kravitz did herself a great disservice by, encouraging her audience to build a wall between themselves and the film. Because by the time we get to the extreme sexual nature of the film, that sexual violence, I'm not engaging with it at the level that I should be. I'm not as disgusted as I should be because I've built that wall. I felt like I was robbed of an opportunity to feel what she wanted me to feel, to experience it in that way, to be provoked, to be shocked. I'd built up a space and a wall unintentionally because I had been warned. And I don't think she did herself a good service, and I think it makes the film look less than what it is. It was a great directorial debut effort, but I think that trigger warning really just hurt the experience. So me personally, myself, and I would say no to trigger warnings. Most people don't need them. Most people can engage with art just fine without them. Most people don't need to put safety rails between them and a film before they engage with it. But if you're part of that minority that feels like you need trigger warnings, then you need to put in the work. You probably shouldn't be watching rated R movies anyway, but do your own research. If you are someone who is easily triggered, you're still healing from your trauma, you're still feeling a bit broken and you're waiting to heal, do your own research. It is not a filmmaker's job to create a safe space or a safe environment for you. Films are not meant to be safe spaces. This is art. You're meant to engage with it. You're meant to be shocked. You're meant to be provoked. And most importantly, you're meant to be challenged. If you're someone, when watching a movie, you don't want to be challenged, then you need to do more research on the films that you plan on watching. But those are my thoughts and opinions on trigger warnings. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. How do you feel about trigger warnings? Do you feel like they're appropriate for films, or do you think people should just do their own research and then come what may? But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I love you. You're amazing. And I'll see you next time.